Thank you. Now that we've done with the formalities, for our Bureau, it is now my opportunity to address you with a view of handing over to the incoming chair of the Union. Excellencies, we are meeting, as I said, at an unprecedented moment in the history of the African Union. Countries and societies around the world have been shaken to their foundations by this deadly and devastating pandemic. This pandemic has been a stark reminder of both our vulnerability as well as our interconnectedness as the human race. It has also demonstrated the value of our Pan-African ideals of unity, solidarity, and cooperation to fulfill our common destiny. Fortified by our unity, we have stepped up to the challenge. Africa has come into her own, led by this, our African Union. Today marks the end of South Africa's tenure as the chair of the African Union. When we assumed the chairship of the African Union in February 2020, the world was a completely different place. As a continent, we identified several priorities for the year. We agreed to focus on the promotion of peace and security as part of the effort to silence the guns in Africa, to also support economic development and integration through the operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Also to advance the economic empowerment of women, and finally, to support good governance and democracy. Yet within a matter of weeks, the coronavirus pandemic forced us to urgently reprioritize both our programs of action and the deployment of our resources. Our most immediate and pressing concern was to manage the impact of the pandemic on the people of our continent. We worked with urgency to develop the Africa Joint Continental Strategy for COVID-19 and have effectively implemented it through the various structures of the AU. We have been ably led by the AU Bureau, which has been at the forefront of coordinating the responses by our member states. As part of our continental response, the Bureau appointed 6 prominent and distinguished Africans as special envoys to mobilize financial resources to support our national health responses and assist in the recovery of our economies. These special envoys are Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala of Nigeria, Dr. Donald Kaberuka of Rwanda, Dr. Ben Kalfa Abderrahmane of Algeria, Mr. Trevor Manuel of South Africa, Mr. Tidjane Thiam of Cote d'Ivoire, and Professor Mbaya Kakwenda from the Democratic Republic of Congo. These outstanding envoys have held extensive engagements with a number of important institutions in the world, the G20, the G7, as well as multilateral institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to mobilize support for middle and lower income countries to mitigate the economic impact of the pandemic through debt relief, the cancellation of debt, the deferment of debt payments, as well as the provision of new funding. Thanks to these and other efforts, the IMF and the World Bank have deployed significant financial resources for the COVID-19 response on our continent. Yet our work is not yet done. Access to concessional finance will remain crucial as countries rebuild their economies. An injection of fresh resources by the IMF through reallocating and issuing new special drawing rights with a bias towards the developing world will correct the glaring inequality in fiscal stimulus measures between advanced economies and the rest of the world. As the African continent, we established a COVID-19 response fund to raise resources for the continental response. Significantly, it was our own member states that made the first contributions towards the capitalization of the fund. In responding to the pandemic, we've been at the forefront of innovation. We established the groundbreaking Africa Medical Supplies Platform to assist AU member states to access affordable medical supplies and equipment. This effort was led by another special envoy, Mr. Strive Masiyiwa of Zimbabwe, who took on the weighty responsibility to coordinate the private sector effort to procure critical personal protective equipment and other essential supplies to combat COVID-19. In establishing this platform, we have given practical meaning to the mantra we often repeat, that we are committed to developing African solutions to African problems. We have harnessed the excellence that exists on our own continent before searching for expertise beyond our shores. Our response to COVID-19 has been driven, coordinated, and capacitated by our own scientists and medical experts, mainly located within the Africa Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention. And now it is our own vaccine acquisition task team that is leading our efforts in the next frontier of the pandemic to acquire vaccines for the people of our continent. As we will report later, the task team has done outstanding work in both securing substantial quantities of COVID-19 vaccines and mobilizing financing so that all African countries can access vaccines for their people. We have stood firm on the principle that the global fight to contain the pandemic must not and cannot leave any of the countries on our continent behind. We have affirmed on all international platforms and in every multilateral engagement that Africa stands and works as one. This is a principle on which we have been consistent, not just with regards to equitable access to medical supplies and vaccines, but also with regards to financial support and debt relief arrangements for vulnerable countries. Despite the enormous impediments presented by the pandemic, our continent is today firmly on the road to economic integration. On the 1st of January 2021, the African Continental Free Trade Area came into operation, realizing the vision of the founders of our continental body and the economic integration and development. And through the Johannesburg Declaration, the AfCFTA came into being. As we work to rebuild our national economies in the wake of the pandemic, this Continental Free Trade Area will be instrumental in driving trade, investment, job creation, business development on the continent through increased manufacturing and the industrialization of our continent. It will enable our recovery to be all the faster and stronger. Ours is an African Union that is practically working towards greater peace and security. Conflict and war on the continent remains a grave threat to our developmental aspirations. We know too well that silencing the guns in Africa is a long and arduous process. We have agreed to extend the implementation of the AU Master Roadmap of practical steps for silencing the guns in Africa for a period of 10 years, from 2020 to 2030. We have further agreed that there must be periodic reviews every 2 years of our implementation of this objective. Last year, we began the new decade for women's economic and financial inclusion, which states our commitment to scale up actions for gender inclusion towards sustainable development. We said that we would leverage Africa's industrialization under the African Continental Free Trade Area to advance women's financial and economic inclusion. During the extraordinary summit of the AfCFTA held in December 2020, we highlighted the need for trade facilitation to support Africa's businesswomen as well as entrepreneurs. Today, we present to member states a proposed summit decision on the program of action on African women in trade. This will be underpinned by a Women in Trade monitoring platform, which will enable state parties to annually report on progress made to strengthen women's participation in the free trade area. South Africa strongly supports the Women, Gender and Development Directorate of the AU in its call for an action plan to increase women's access to financial services. This includes tailor-made financial products for women with reliable means to save, to access, to transfer, and to borrow money. As the AU, we should also develop a decade action plan to help member states determine and implement key flagship activities towards women's economic empowerment. We all remain concerned at the high levels of violence against women and children on our continent. Therefore, we request the Assembly to adopt a decision to develop a convention of ending violence against women and children that will amplify our commitment to promote, to protect, and to fulfill women's as well as girls' rights. To also take a decision to adopt a decision to convene a women-led peace forum attended by heads of state and government, and to implement the decisions of the Peace and Security Council to institutionalize the office of the Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security. To also adopt a decision to establish a heads of state-level circle of champions that can champion and drive the necessary change. We also call on member states to ratify the International Labour Organization Convention 190 on eliminating violence and harassment in the world of work. We'd like to commend Namibia for leading in this regard. It is our firm belief that the economic empowerment and emancipation of women will go a long way in ending the scourge of violence against women and girls on our continent. The African Union must be unequivocal that all human beings, regardless of sex and gender, are both equal. At the founding conference of the OAU, one of Africa's most celebrated sons, Kwame Nkrumah, said, open quotes, "There is no time to waste. We must unite now or perish. No sporadic act, no pious resolution can resolve our present problems. Nothing will be of avail except the united act of a united Africa," close quotes. Indeed, Your Excellencies, there is no time to waste. If we are to overcome this pandemic and address all the challenges that our continent faces, we must forge meaningful partnerships and pursue greater cooperation. We must continue to implement the institutional reforms necessary for the African Union to become a professional and self-sustaining organization. As we hand over, as South Africa, the baton to the Democratic Republic of Congo, we are determined to continue working with President Tshisekedi to ensure that Africa becomes an integrated continent that is politically united, based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of African Renaissance. I would like to extend my gratitude to the chairman of the AU Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, and the way that he and I have worked during the course of this year. It has been nothing but outstanding and exemplary and cooperative. I'd also like to thank members of the Bureau and also the members, the regional economic communities, the AU Commission, the Africa CDC, led by Dr. John Nkengasong, who has been a shining star and a great leader in our fight against COVID-19. I would also like to thank the various envoys that we appointed to work with us, both to meet and address the COVID-19 challenge, as well as the envoys we are appointed to help us to silence the guns on our continent. I'd also like to thank the international community, without whose support the chairship of the AU for 2020 would have been far more daunting as a mission. I also want to thank the heads of the various AU institutions, as well as the staff of the AU Commission, for all the support that they gave us during this period. And Your Excellencies, it has been a joy to serve alongside all of you during this period. And as I hand over to His Excellency, President Felix Tshisekedi, I hand over with joy, knowing that the work that I took over from President al-Sisi will indeed be continued under the leadership of President Tshisekedi. I thank you. Thank you very much. What do I? Oh, we changed the flag now. What do I do? When do I hand over?
Do you want?
Nous vous remercions, Monsieur le Président, tout en vous souhaitant
When do we hand over the flag? Is there a ceremony?
There's no ceremony. You're supposed to say hand over.
Oh, well, we have the handing over first. The chairperson of the commission is going to stand in for the outgoing chairperson of the commission.
It is now my pleasure to symbolically hand over the flag of our union to President Tshisekedi and wish him the very best as he takes on this task of leading our union. Congratulations, President Tshisekedi, and I now hand over the flag as well as the gavel to you as our new chairperson of the AU. Thank you very much. Here is the flag. Thank you.